Okay. Last night I read this small book, David Crawford, Manual for the Dead, newly published by um Trinde. Oh, they start a new imprint called Kratos Books. I didn't notice that. Um, so basically, he has interviews on YouTube. Also, had he flatlined twice due to severe alcoholism and organ failure, and and the book is like his experience of living in the afterlife and everything he encountered and his way of navigating it um spiritually, and then waking up back in the hospital and trying to like transition back to normal life. And he had trained in Zen Buddhism, full lotus padmasana meditation, and martial arts. And then he was on an online forum, and I don't know which one it was, but he met a woman who was into Franz Barden, and I had I had read Franz Barden for from based on someone else's recommendation, and he was basically like a theosophist, Rosicrucian from Czechoslovakia, and he ended up being tortured by um, the Nazis. According to his secretary, that's the story, is that he, you know, refused to, like, Hitler wanted Franz Barden to help him spiritually, I don't know, use his magical powers or whatever, and Barden refused to do it, and so he was tortured, and he ended up dying from pancreatitis. Anyway, so I think like the end of the book, he lists Franz Barden's book, and he says everything in Franz Barden's books is real. Initiation in hermetics. And yes, the spirits he lists are real. Treat with caution. So then he also lists the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Living and Dead, and the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, and another Zen book, and another Zen book, and then another Mahayana Buddhism book. His argument is basically like that when you pass over, there are certain archon spirit, like archon encounters. He says they're not even necessarily spirits, but it's just like a pattern of information that will create a reality for you that you then need to like escape from. The main point of his book, is to try to escape from the near death experience to get back to being alive. And the interesting thing is he talks about the spirit as the fire element being what you want to like really hold on to, and that's what powers your soul. And so the soul is more individualistic, but the spirit is actually impersonal. And this is basically the same concept as what they call the Wan Shen in Taoism, and in Buddhism it's called the clear light, or the Fa Shen. And so there's this idea of turning the light around in meditation, and in Franz Barden was influenced by Gurdjieff also. So there's this concept of self-remembering, which is basically what they call vichara in Indian Advaita Vedanta, which is called self-inquiry, or investigating the source of the I thought. So um, everything you perceive originates from the sense of I, or the spiritual ego. And so you turn that light around, And for me, the real secret to that is this listening process and the biology of listening, how listening is actually faster than light, than what we perceive through vision, even though 80% of our, like two-thirds of our brain is for vision. And Western reality is very much defined by our visual perception and external measurements. And so it's a pretty fascinating book about like the different, he goes through the different spirits encounters or whatever that you need to navigate, and kind of like what their purpose is in. And his idea here is that like your soul is going to get sort of like broken apart, dismantled into pieces, and you'll get destroyed in the afterlife, and then reborn, back into another physical body that won't remember its previous physical body. And he quotes Buddha about talking about the rebirth it's a quote from the Theravada Buddhism. So the, Hinduism, like Buddhism, doesn't believe in reincarnation necessarily, but in rebirth. Basically the idea being that you have the skandhas, the five skandhas, so your personal soul is actually composed of these more impersonal processes. So it's very much a book, sort of like a combination of Mahayana Buddhism and or Buddhism and Western Gnosticism as alchemy. And yeah, I think it's a really cool book actually. If you already understand the principles behind it, like this idea of the spirit being impersonal, that's like, it's not really a typical Western view of spirit, because normally people think of spirit as something that's like your, like astral travel, like it's a personal thing. And I mean, it's tragic that he had to go through that near-death experience of flatlining twice. And I think part of the problem is it's like just the Western, like from Platonic philosophy, it's very much like mind over matter. And you find that in Buddhism too. So for example, Master Nanhua Chin says the Japanese Zen Buddhism doesn't practice full lotus enough, so like he mentions practicing full lotus, I think it was like 4 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours for Zen meditation in a monastery that he trained in. I think must have been somewhere in England, because I think he's from England. He's English. And which is really great. It's awesome. But the thing is that like in the traditional training, I mean, you really do have to like fast for a week while you're meditating the whole time. And then you build that up. So like the Qigong master I studied with, he went 28 days of nonstop full lotus meditation. And Master Nanhua Chin says like, if you want to be a monk of his, you have to go 1 week of nonstop full lotus meditation, just to kind of like, fully open the third eye. So there's, and then Chen Yilin, he trained at Shaolin for 3 months, doing the horse dance every day for 2 hours, nonstop. So it's very much like a deep physical transformation of the body that we lack in the Western tradition, except for a few like Christian mystics who kind of had that physical transformation as sort of like a byproduct of their deep prayer, meditation, and fasting. But the idea is like to wake up to this universal awareness as a force. That's the fire element that he says, that's your spirit, that's impersonal. And if you can hold on to that and just like observe as that reality while you're in the afterlife, then you'll be able to come back to our physical reality and be able to remember your past life experience, which is basically what this book is about. It's like that was his past life experience in the afterworld. But on the other hand, you got to realize that as far as the near death experience goes, he points out, well, like, what he experienced isn't typical of seeing the light and meeting Jesus or whatever. But on the other hand, he was heavily influenced by Franz Barden. So his near death experience probably definitely was a byproduct of his studying, his subconscious studying Franz Barden and taking that in. And you can just tell just his writing style and everything, like he was very much influenced by Franz Barden. So he starts off the book saying that he marries a woman who was really into Franz Barden, and then he proceeds to focus on 4 principles of this awareness. And Franz Barden also relies on 4 principles that he calls the I think it's like the quadrupolar magnetism or something like that. Basically, like mind, body, spirit, and consciousness. For him, he says it's volition, intention, memory, and meditation. But the volition is your willpower. I think that might be one of the 4 principles. Anyway.
Who are you talking to?